Every baptized person in this church is a disciple of Jesus by the very fact of being baptized. And there may even be, there probably is, some who are not baptized who are on the way to being baptized. And of course, by that very fact of intending or wanting to be baptized, you are a disciple of Jesus. But we hear this in this Sunday's gospel, that there is more to being a disciple than simply being baptized and calling oneself a believer. Jesus himself tells us about the importance of being ready, of being engaged. When we hear the parable in the gospel, we might think that the Lord is talking about believer and non-believer, the wise and the foolish. Or his original audience may have thought he's talking about the distinction between Jew and Gentile, about the pagans and the Jews. He's not. Jesus makes this clear when he speaks of 10 maidens, or other translation, 10 virgins, same thing. But they're all living the same life. Think of all of them as being baptized, the 10 baptized. They're all disciples, and yet he makes a clear distinction amongst these 10, or between these 10. 5 are foolish, 5 are wise. So what's the difference from being a foolish or a wise maiden disciple? Some of the disciples were ready, and some were not ready. To put it into contemporary language, some of the disciples were engaged and some were not engaged. So what's an engaged disciple? Well, it's first important to know that the word engaged does not mean necessarily being involved or active. Even in a company, you can have somebody who's very active and yet they're an agent, they're a saboteur. They sabotage everything that the company is really trying to do. So they're active and they're involved, but they're not engaged in the company's vision. So being engaged does not mean being involved, necessarily being involved or active. It could be. The word refers to members who are on board and excited about what is going on. So again, even in a company, somebody who's excited, buys into the vision of the company, they are engaged. And of course, that will lead to other things, but they need that excitement about what's going on, about the vision of the company. Hence, simply being consciously engaged is enough to be a fruitful disciple. This being excited and on board about what is going on in a parish drives spiritual commitment, which in turn produces fruit. Because the person who's engaged, who's excited, actually will want eventually to do something, will want to have their excitement realized, or to use spiritual language, bear fruit. Where this leads is, perhaps there are some here who have thought, as you hear all this language about a 10-year vision, becoming engaged disciples and so on, perhaps some people think to themselves, well, all the time I thought being a disciple really was super difficult and complicated, or that producing fruit, spiritual fruit, was for some sort of special class of parishioners. But being engaged just the way I described it, which is very accurate, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. In this parish of Corpus Christi, we define engaged disciples this way: parishioners who strive to be fully committed to holiness, mission, community, and service. Parishioners who strive to be fully committed to holiness, mission, community, and service. See, strive. We're not perfect, but strive. In our 10-year vision, when we become a parish of engaged disciples, we will begin to see, and actually are already experiencing or seeing before us, a busy campus with the parish hall being used every night. It's getting there. We're only 2.5 years into it. We see a culture of evangelization. And remember, when you hear this big word, it basically means the good news. It's the proclamation of the good news of Jesus Christ. So we see a culture of evangelization, people wanting to share their faith, not just receive, but actually share their faith, that results in 50 new people in RCIA. And this year we have 10 people in RCIA, so the vision is working. Now, we've actually had more people in RCIA in the past. So what's the difference? The difference is I can't say this about every culture or every parish, but this is the reality of our parish. Most of the people in RCIA are Asian. Asians specifically tend to be Chinese from Hong Kong. It could be from Hong Kong, but mainland China. Could also be Vietnamese, but tends to be mostly Chinese from mainland China. You put them into an RCIA program, they have no clue what you're talking about when you speak about Jesus Christ. Many people don't know who Jesus is. You start talking about the 4 marks of the church, 1 holy, Catholic, and apostolic. They don't have the frame of reference. And then it's not a matter of being, they just don't know, right? They're coming from a former country that, unless they've met somebody and had lots of conversations, they just don't know. So now we have people, and also usually people start in September in RCIA and then baptized at Easter. This has produced very bad statistics in the church, which means people go through the cycle, the treadmill, and anywhere from 40 to 70% of those people are actually in the wind 6 to 8 months later, which means they're gone. They don't return to the practice of their faith. Why? They weren't connected. They weren't rooted. They didn't start off with a good solid base. They weren't really ready, but they were on the treadmill. That's the way it tends to happen. Now we require everybody to go through Alpha. They meet people. They're connected. It's an entry-level course, for lack of better words, program, talking about Christianity, Jesus Christ, basic realities of Christianity. Then they go through level 1 in the CCO program, Discovery, and then they go into RCIA. And even then, it's not an automatic you'll get baptized at Easter, because now we want to accompany people, not just put them on a treadmill. So it may take 9 months. It may take 15 months. It may take 2 years when they're ready. That's what's the difference. And that comes from a vision. It's actually a lot of work. As I have said many times in the past, this 10-year vision that we now have in this parish, and against which everything will be measured, this 10-year vision came out of holy discontent that I had for many years because of what was happening in the church, and knowing that not one of these things was inevitable. So we keep talking about, the RCIA candidates 6 months in the wind. Obviously, that doesn't mean everyone. But the statistics say it's a good portion of them. One person is too many, but it's far more than one person. And so we keep talking about these statistics, but what are we doing different to have a different outcome? Unless you have a vision to know where you're going and how you're going to get there, you're just going to be repeating the same cycle and complaining about the same statistics. You do that in business, you're not going anywhere, you're going out of business, right? So there's so many things like this that are happening, but they're not inevitable. The false idea also that the priest is supposed to do everything. It's partly my fault and partly your fault. It's probably more my fault, the job of the priest, to actually not only lead people in such a way that he shares not only his authority, but his power. So people have decision-making power. Jesus not only shared his authority, go forth and but he shared his power. When you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven. That's a divine power that Jesus actually risked giving to very imperfect instruments, knowing that they would make a lot of mistakes. But he did it. He raised them up and he sent them out. So these are just a few of the examples. Also, many parents in our school are not practicing the faith, school or prep. And therefore, their children are not coming to church. So we keep talking about it, even at priest council meetings, and perhaps you talk about it, so on and so on. What are we doing different for a different outcome? It's heartbreaking to know that every Sunday, just to use one example, there are parents who come into this church, wait in the vestibule for the collection, and drop the collection in the collection basket, and then leave. I know this is happening. There's only so much that I can do, though. I can't be the police, as it were. Sometimes several parents give their envelopes to one parent, and they become a courier. So why do they do this? Every parent in the school knows probably why they do this. So they can be in category 1 and get a lesser fee for their tuition. So basically, they lie. Does anyone think Jesus will count anyone in this category as a disciple? No. There are many who do not come to Mass for all sorts of reasons, or come whenever it is convenient. It's one of the reasons why I'm convinced of the need to, and am now raising up a committee with the sole purpose to establish a vision within the 10-year vision, like youth ministry. Youth ministry has a vision that is within the 10-year vision of this parish. To have a vision within the 10-year vision with the specific goal, intention of evangelizing school parents, both in the school, this Corpus Christi school, but also in our PREP, Parish Religious Education Program. This is not the only group of people that needs to have a life-changing encounter with Jesus Christ, to know the good news of salvation. And that is why we have now at Corpus Christi a thriving youth ministry. So within 2.5 years, it's actually had to split. Used to be youth ministry 8 to 12. Now it's junior youth ministry 7 to 10, and senior youth ministry 11 and 12 in university. As well, popular seniors ministry is rising again for anyone 55 and older, if you're willing to admit you're a senior at 55, which is rapidly growing even at this early stage. It's only about 3 or 4 weeks. This is not about seniors getting together and just playing cards. You can do that at your home. There's nothing wrong with playing cards, don't get me wrong. But it's a matter of getting together and understanding how this ministry falls into the 10-year vision and the core values of the vision. Because Christ calls all of us to be his disciples, to be engaged disciples. You can play cards too, no problemo. But as engaged disciples, so what are we going to do with the time and the gifts that God has given to us? There's so much to be done. I'm sure you agree, we desperately need to introduce our school parents to a life-changing encounter with Jesus Christ so that they can become engaged disciples. We need to introduce them to the Lord so that they can become his disciples and experience a better life that only Jesus can give them. Jesus is different. The fruits of this will lead to them being excited about the parish vision that we are blessed with. As any engaged disciple will tell you, Jesus does change our life. And he changes it for the better. Jesus changes our priorities. He changes your priorities. All of a sudden, things you thought were not possible become possible because the Lord has actually helped you understand that needs to be put in a different place in your life. And I need to be in the forefront. Jesus changes what makes us truly happy and fulfilled. Imagine what our school and parish would look like with 332 engaged families and their 460 children in love with the Lord and on fire for the church. You might think I'm wishful thinking. I don't like wishful thinking, but I do like thinking bold. If you're trying to come up with a vision and you don't think bold, you're wasting your time. Don't waste your breath. You have to think bold. Bold is not impossible. Bold is difficult. But what isn't difficult is worth it. So yeah, there's a lot of work in this. And I don't have to do this. It makes my life more complicated. And the people that I'm asking to be on this committee and the consequences of this will not always be smooth. But I'm determined as all get out that it's going to rise and it's going to be projected into the life of this parish school community. I'm absolutely confident this can become a reality. If you are an engaged disciple, then keep asking our Lord to help you serve him and the others around you. To be very aware also of how important it is to fuel your engagement with your prayer life. It's critical that we pray, we make time, we carve out time to pray, to be with the Master, to be with Jesus in prayer. If you are not engaged, ask Jesus to help you get excited about the 10-year vision. It really is meant to serve you. It's meant to serve all of us. We're all going to benefit from it, but its primary direction is the parish here at Corpus Christi, which of course involves the school and prep. Also be aware of how important it is to establish a prayer life. Begin with 15 minutes. There's nobody on the face of this earth or in this parish that can't carve out 15 minutes. You might get antsy for being quiet 15 minutes, but it will pay off if you persevere. So no music, no news feeds before you actually spend some time in prayer. Drink a coffee or a cup of tea if you have to. Get your brain functioning properly. Let prayer set the trajectory of your day. It does change things. You expect me to pray, whether you voice it or not. You expect the priest to pray. Otherwise, what are you a priest for? Well, actually, I expect you to pray too. Jesus expects all of us to be engaged in some form of prayer, other than going to Mass. Jesus, the bridegroom, is always calling us to see if we are ready, engaged, so that when he calls, we follow him. It's the greatest adventure in life. So be ready. Be like the wise maidens in the gospel. Pray for the grace to be an engaged disciple.